Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
We are joined for the next 25 minutes by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's an American economist, and he's, of course, a syndicated columnist as well. He's a former editor of the Wall Street Journal and Business Week, and he is the father of Reaganomics, and he's really needs no introduction to our audience. We have a lot of new stations, a lot of new listeners, so I guess he does. And we'll give you his website address as well on screen coming up here in just a moment. We also carry his work at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But before I go any further, I just want to cover the waterfront with him to make sense of what's going on in the economic meltdown, clearly a global depression. This Market Watch article, scary 1929 market chart, gains traction. Government is gearing up for a collapse. I think we're going into a slow collapse, but I want to get an update from him on that. But first, the reason I wanted to get him on last week, and now he's here, is to talk about Ukraine. And again, I'm not a Putinite, but compared to what we've got, our system's so bad, he's not aggressively trying to expand things. He stopped the Syria war, the purge of Christians. Clearly, the Saudi Arabians are bombing them because they didn't go along with the takeover of Syria to destabilize the Olympics. But you see Ukraine not voting at first to go with the EU. And now Russia is not even trying to control Ukraine from what I've seen. I want a free and independent Ukraine. And George Soros' people are all over this, as usual, trying to destabilize Russia because they want a new world order run by the Wall Street kleptocrats. They want a new world order run by anti-free market folks that make the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, look like a saint. That's the bottom line. This is not America doing this to Russia. This is criminal elements doing it. In my view, I want Dr. Roberts' take on that. So there's the preface of my questions and how I see it. This is a big deal, though, to be trying to overthrow Ukraine, and audio recordings of this, obviously, with ambassadors coming out, and a very serious situation. Dr. Roberts, give us your expert breakdown, because I know you were in big talks with the Russians so they bring down their empire at the end of the Reagan administration. I know that you know a lot of these folks. You know the French. You've gotten their highest award for some of the work you've done on that front as well. What's really happening right now?
In the Ukraine, there was a joint effort initially between the EU and Washington to bring the to bring the Ukraine into NATO and into EU. Now, the EU just wanted an expansion of its domain. Washington wanted to have the Ukraine incorporated into NATO so they can put more military bases on Russia's frontier. And they also want to have their puppets running the country so that it can be opened up for looting by the American banks and the American corporations. You know, like, for example, Latvia was. So what has happened is for many years, Washington and also the EU have been financing what are called NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in Ukraine. Last December, this Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State who's running the operation, the American operation there, told the National Press Club that Washington had invested $5 billion in agitation in the Ukraine. And so what we're witnessing now is all of these NGOs, some of them pretend to be human rights organizations, some pretend to be educational, to teach democracy, some are just provocative. And they have used these, that is the State Department, the CIA, have used these institutions, these NGOs, to have this ongoing protest. Now, the EU and Washington have now fallen out over this because the EU has realized that for Washington to take over the Ukraine is a direct threat to Russia. And they realized that Russia can cut Europe off from oil and natural gas, and they realized that if there's a war, Europe will be destroyed.
And that's why we don't need Ukraine to fall to the EU that's going to suck it dry. That's like asking to have cancer implanted in you. Clearly predatory. As you know, their own EU documents have come out that it was a planned program to consolidate and suck countries dry. So the Ukrainians vote to not join it. And so they have hordes of paid operatives take to the streets. It'd be one thing if these were real, Ukrainians wanting to get rid of their government. But clearly these are foreign, manipulated, saboteur operatives by every benchmark.
Well, the NGOs are financed by the West, and they have provoked it. But I think most of the people out there are just dupes. They're Ukrainians.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, the Western Ukraine is...
Sure, I'm talking about the NGOs that are made up of Ukrainian operatives.
Sorry?
I was talking about the NGOs themselves, doctors.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was in Washington when they decided to create the National Endowment for Democracy, which is sort of the parent organization for these NGOs. And the explicit purpose given was that it would be used to destabilize Eastern Europe and Soviet republics, and would be used for the benefit of American hegemony. And that's the reason it was created. And so we've seen it operate in many places. They tried to achieve that revolution, that color revolution in the Ukraine. What do they call it? The Orange Revolution, I think.
Yes, they've tried over and over again.
And they came very close to getting the Ukraine then. And
they tried to have Georgia start a war with Russia. A very dangerous situation. What do you expect Russia to do? I mean, they're starting to really get in more of a fighting stance.
Well, I don't know what they will do. One prospect is the country will split apart because the eastern Ukraine is more Russian. It's Russian Orthodox. The western Ukraine is less Russian. It's Catholic. And I think that it's really two countries, and what you may see is a split. What I find so distressing is that the Ukrainians I think these protests are largely in the western part.
No, they are. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and so what I find distressing is that these protesters are such dupes that they're destroying the independence of their own country. They don't understand that if you are in the EU, that your national government is subservient to the EU.
How can they not look at Greece and Spain and Ireland and everywhere? I mean, this is like wanting to get in the car with Jeffrey Dahmer or something. Why would anyone want to join the EU?
That just shows the influence of the NGOs. You know, the NGOs, like Victoria Nuland said, Washington spent $5 billion. That's $5,000 million. You can buy a lot of people for that money. You can buy a lot. And the years of agitation by these NGOs, and also, you know, in the Western Ukraine, there's a huge disaffection from Russia. There's this romantic form of Ukrainian nationalism, and there's a real dislike of Russia. So even though Ukraine is independent now, they have this notion that, well, the country will somehow be under Russia's thumb unless we can get under the thumb of the Europeans and the Americans. So it's kind of a nonsensical thing, but it is very dangerous because I think that the Russians do view a NATO bases in Ukraine, or in Ukraine as it's called now.
That's right on their border.
As a direct threat. And so and this is why there's now a divergence between the EU and the United States, and why Victoria Nuland said, you know, screw the EU.
Yeah, for those that don't know, tell them about that.
Well, the Europeans realized that this was going too far, and they wanted to stop encouraging the protests. because they understand that it dawned on them that it's a threat to Russia, and then therefore it's an indirect threat to Europe. And so the Europeans, the EU, said, we've had enough, let's stop these protests. And Washington said, no, we're going to keep them going. We're going to use the protests, turn it into a revolt, take over the government. See, we've got a list of the candidates we're going to put in charge. And the EU was protesting.
And by the way, that's what the Russians used to do, was get a quasi-puppet government in that would then invite them into these countries. We are doing what the USSR used to do. I mean, we're doing the bad guy deeds, correct?
No, but we always have, especially in Central and South America. There's never been any difference, really, between the United States and the Soviet Union and how they manipulate other countries. But what we're doing now is we're manipulating the countries in the Russian sphere of influence. We've gone beyond our own sphere of influence. The whole world now is our sphere of influence. No other country has.
And what do you make, what's the strategy? I mean, I want your take on this, to have the athletes dressing like women. I mean, you know, everybody loved us because of James Dean and John Wayne. And I mean, guys that dress like women, that's great. But should our national symbol be a man in drag? I mean, should that be our symbol at the Olympics? I don't think that propaganda is very well thought out.
No, it's not. But we don't need to get into that right now. We've got the Ukraine and the economy, which are important.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying, like British Deputy Defense Minister said 2 weeks ago, the United States doesn't even seem to have a strategy now except chaos, and we're losing all the soft power. What do you think of Washington right now? I mean, how would you describe its setup? I mean, do they know what they're doing? Are they out of control? What's going on?
I think overall, it's sort of out of control, but on specific things, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing in the Ukraine. And notice that this week, the House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a resolution supporting the protest in the Ukraine, as if that's got anything to do with the United States. And they issued a threat of imposing sanctions should the Ukrainian police put the protests down. So in other words, if you treat people there the way our police treat protesters in the United States, we're going to put sanctions on you. So this type of hypocrisy, it must stun the world. You know, what happens to peaceful protesters in the United States? They get beat up and tasered and tear gas.
That's right, PaulCraigRoberts.org. Let me ask you this question then. Looking at this, what does your gut tell you? How is the Ukraine going to go?
Well, I don't know. I think that ultimately it could split. If you see, the Ukraine has given up on putting down the protest, and they even abolished the laws against protest. And the police have been viciously attacked. A lot of them have been burnt with Molotov cocktails. They've been charged with bulldozers, but they haven't replied with the kind of violence that you would expect. Any protesters in the United States acting like the Ukrainian protesters are would have been shot down in the streets and killed, because the Ukrainian protests are not peaceful. They're extremely violent. And the police are just sort of sitting there taking it. So I think...
well, it's clear the government knows it was unpopular to join the EU, so they're acting like they're neutral, but the order's gone down, stand down, let this happen, fake Arab Spring, and then there'll be a civil war. It'll split up, which is the grand strategy of tension that Brzezinski's been pushing, and there you go.
I don't think the United States wants it to split up, because if it does, then the western part will be reincorporated in Russia.
And they won't get the pipelines.
And that's right. And so the rump state wouldn't be enough for the EU or the US. But I think what may happen is that the EU simply disassociates from this policy and breaks off from it, which leaves it as a Washington thing only. And that then could weaken it. And
that could be good cop, bad cop, too. Let's get to the economy. We only have a little bit of this segment, the next one left. What do you make of the, I'm sure you've seen the market graph that the Wall Street Journal Market Watch has. Scary 1929 market chart gains traction. If market follows the same script, trouble lies directly ahead. They're slowing down on QE Unlimited. Dr. Roberts.
Well, you have to keep in mind that in 1929, the United States government wasn't in there manipulating every market. There was no plunge protection team, no exchange stabilization plan. There wasn't the Federal Reserve manipulating the price of gold, driving up the price of bonds, manipulating the stock market. Today, all the markets are manipulated, so it would be a mistake to compare manipulated markets to the extent they're manipulated now.
Well, then how long can the false reality continue?
I think the Fed can manipulate things until the dollar goes. The only vulnerability that I can see in this is if there's a run on the dollar and because the Fed has really no way to guarantee to support the dollar price. They can't print foreign currencies to buy dollars, and apparently they don't any longer have any gold. So I think
that's right. The Germans asked for their gold a year ago and have gotten basically none of it.
Right. I think that the vulnerability is the dollar, and the dollar is what was threatened by QE, and I think the reason they're backing off on QE is trying to take some of the pressure off the dollar. Because if the dollar goes, it's a bigger crisis than the banks failing. And so their house of cards, I think, they can keep it going until there's a foreign run on the dollar, and it may not happen. It's just, you don't know how long they can keep this going.
So that's really it. The liberty, the scientists we had created the greatest technologies. They've been turned towards fraud. The world is at a technological disadvantage, and we're being inserted into a false system. And I guess that's why we see the hubris coming out of Washington.
Right. That's right. Look, the trading desk, as I understand it, the trading desk of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, it is now huge, and they can do everything: stocks, bonds, commodities, gold, foreign currencies. and they have the mechanisms in place to intervene in all of those markets. And in recent columns that I did together with Dave Kranzler, an experienced gold trader, we point out, we can isolate to the minute the manipulation.
Incredible. I want to talk about that manipulation straight ahead with Dr. Roberts.
Attention gun owners. It's reasonable to assume that at some point you may need to defend your family from an armed attack. But is it reasonable to mount a defense without a strong offense? Infidel Body Armor goes on in seconds. Is civilian legal in all 50 states. Is 100% made in the USA. Is veteran owned and ships next business day for free. Go to InfidelBodyArmor.com. INFIDEL Bodyarmor.com. Infidel Body Armor. Just won't quit.
You've been hearing about the amazing benefits of Heart and Body Extract for many years. Now, hear from the co-founder.
My name is Tony Knudsen, and I am the co-founder of Heart and Body Extract. We've been in business for over 13 years now.
With thousands of satisfied customers who have experienced the amazing benefits but never experienced a price hike.
We've kept consistent pricing the whole entire time the company's been in business, and will continue to do so.
Call today for Heart and Body Extract, 866-295-5305, or visit hbextract.com.
The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other toxic members of the fluoride family are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the American people. So why are the social engineers adding it to the water? Simple. Dumb down the host population that the parasitic technocracy is feeding on. We may not have been able to get fluoride out of the water supply yet, but we can help to get it out of our bodies. I am extremely excited to announce the exclusive InfoWars Life Fluoride Shield formulation, fusing 6 of the best documented ingredients from around the world to help the body remove not just toxic fluoride residues from the body, but a whole host of toxic substances. Let's take a stand against the globalists by blocking their poisons with Fluoride Shield. I use Fluoride Shield every day. Secure your Fluoride Shield and other pioneering formulations at InfoWarsLife.com today. Let's start cleansing our bodies now and support the InfoWar at the same time. That's InfoWarsLife.com.
For thousands of years, silver has been used as both a medicine and a preservative. But not all silver is equal. Supernatural Silver is an amazing new technology that has been clinically shown to be several hundred times more effective than colloidal or ionic silver. Supernatural Silver resonates at the same frequency as germicidal light used in labs to kill bacteria and viruses. Supernatural Silver is a broad-spectrum microbial that creates no resistance and does not harm beneficial bacteria, making it ideal for daily use. It can be used internally as well as topically and is highly effective against bacteria, viruses, molds, and yeast. Supernatural Silver liquid and gel are perfect for on-the-go or emergency preparedness and can provide protection at home, school, or work. Go to supernaturalsilver.com and remember the promo code SILVER2014 for 20% off. That's supernaturalsilver.com. Supernaturalsilver.com. Give yourself and your loved ones a fighting chance.
He's the T-Rex of political talk. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
All right, final segment with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We got 6 minutes. I'm going to try to let him cover the rest of the economy, where he sees it going. And then we're coming up in the next hour, Naked Ambition. TSA wants new generation of body scanners. Rough seas ahead. The new Noah movie is a eugenics, anti-population, basically alien flick. Some of that's coming up. Dr. Roberts, finishing up with the fact that this whole thing's rigged. I mean, that just keeps coming out. Even the Rolling Stone did an investigation, as you know, years ago, saying it's all rigged. That was the headline. What else is on your radar? Where do we go from here? What do we do?
Well, I don't know what we can do, Alex, other than what you and I try to do is give people information that's more or less on the mark. There's no recovery. They continue to pretend that. If you read Janet Yeltsin's testimony, she's the new Fed chairman, before Congress, it was all about how we have this recovery, which doesn't exist. So when you live in a world of complete, total disinformation, what do you do? What I suspect is going to happen, but I don't know, is the economy will continue to weaken this year. It'll get weaker so that the deficit becomes a bigger issue again. The debt ceiling has to be raised higher. It puts more pressure. The Fed will have to restart quantitative easing or boost it, or else they'll have to let the economy go to save the dollar. It's hard to know where the Fed will come out on this because it's really caught between two big crises. And one is you cannot forever print your currency in such enormous amounts and not see the exchange value of your currency collapse in the exchange markets. So that is the limit on their ability to have quantitative easing. On the other hand, if they don't do quantitative easing and the economy is weakening, and they're faced with collapse of employment, collapse of the bond market, collapse of the stock market, and that's an immediate crisis.
So what's the slow weaning going to do then?
The slow weaning right now, I think, is show. It's show to take pressure off the dollar. It may be they're running out of the ability to manipulate the gold price. And so they want to take pressure off of quantitative easing on the dollar. One of the reasons for the rapid rise in gold was that people said, well, they're just going to inflate the currency away. Well, quantitative easing sort of proved that that's what they were going to do. So if they back off from it, it sort of quiets down the fears about the dollar being overproduced. I just don't think they have a good long-term plan for their economic situation.
Well, that's evident by the police state Europe, absolutely.
Right. And we also don't know whether they may be caught off guard by what happens in the Ukraine. You know, now Kerry, the Secretary of State, is threatening France with sanctions.
Crazy.
Because French companies are going over to see about doing business with the Iranians, because it looks like the sanctions are going to be removed. And so Kerry is threatening France. But when you start threatening your own NATO allies, you don't know what the result is. We know that the German government is very upset with Washington. They can't get its goal. They're spied on. They don't want to be dragged into a war with Russia. They're very uneasy about all this Ukraine business. How does it benefit them to have the Russians?
It's simply deteriorating, and we'll get you back up in a month if you can do it to give us an update. Thank you so much, sir, for the time. All right, we'll be right back with the next hour.
This is GCN, the Genesis Communications Radio Network.
PaulCraigRoberts.org is his site, folks. Infowars.com.